All right, let's do this. The entire field of economics. We're talking everything from your morning coffee to global trade, all of it, explained in the next 5 minutes. Sound a little crazy? Yeah, probably. Let's see how we do.
See, it all starts with something incredibly simple. You. You're a person, and you want stuff. You want food, you want a place to live, and let's be honest, you probably want a TV that's just a little bigger than your cousin's. It's just human nature. We want things.
But that kind of begs the question, right? If wanting stuff is so universal, why can't we all just have it all? What's stopping us?
The answer is one single powerful word: scarcity. And this, right here, is the fundamental problem that created the entire field of economics. There just isn't enough stuff. Not enough pizza, not enough houses, not enough giant TVs, for everyone to have everything they could possibly want. If everything was infinite, we wouldn't need economics. But it's not. And that means we have to make choices.
So that brings us right into our first section, why economics is even a thing. We're going to see how your personal choices, your individual decisions, scale all the way up to create the entire marketplace.
So, because of scarcity, every single choice you make has this hidden price tag. It's called opportunity cost. Think about it. By choosing to watch this, you are actively choosing not to do something else, like, say, watch a bunch of cat videos. The value of those unseen cat videos? That's your opportunity cost. I'll try to make this worth it, I promise.
Now, one of the biggest choices we make is to trade with each other. And the reason why is this awesome idea called comparative advantage. Okay, just look at the numbers here. To make 2 tons of coffee, Brazil only has to give up making 1 ton of corn. But for Canada to make that same amount of coffee, they have to give up 2 tons of corn. So in a way, coffee is cheaper for Brazil to make. It makes sense for Brazil to just focus on coffee, Canada to focus on corn, and then they trade. They both end up with way more stuff than if they tried to do it all themselves. It's a total win-win.
And all this trading, it happens in a market, which is really just any place where buyers and sellers get together. The whole thing runs on incentives. The amount people want something is the demand, the amount people are willing to make is the supply, and that sweet spot where they meet, that's the equilibrium price, the magic number where a deal gets done.
But trading corn for coffee directly is, well, messy. So we invented money. And I love this quote because it just nails it. Money is economic lube. It's not wealth itself, it's just a tool, a medium of exchange that makes all this trading super efficient and keeps the gears of the economy spinning smoothly.
Okay, let's zoom out a little for our second section. We're going from these individual trades to looking at how we make and measure all the stuff in an entire country, from your avocado toast all the way up to something called GDP.
So, how do you measure a whole economy? Well, the most common way is with gross domestic product, or GDP. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's just adding up all the spending. You've got C for consumption, that's you, buying stuff. I for investment, that's businesses buying machines. G for government spending on things like roads. And finally, X minus M for net exports, the stuff we sell to other countries minus the stuff we buy from them. Add it all up and boom, you've got a snapshot of the economy.
But, and this is a big but, GDP is not the whole story. It's a useful number for sure, but it misses a ton. It doesn't count unpaid work, like taking care of your kids. It doesn't count any illegal activity. And, maybe most importantly, it says nothing about your happiness, the health of our planet, or how fairly all that economic pie is being sliced up. So, if the economy is like this big, complex car, you gotta ask, who's in the driver's seat? Well, that brings us to Section 3. There are 2 major players trying to steer this thing: governments and central banks.
Think of them as the economy's 2 bosses. On one side, you have the government, and they use what's called fiscal policy. Their tools are pretty straightforward: taxing and spending. On the other side, you have the central bank, like the Fed in the US. They use monetary policy, which is all about controlling interest rates and the money supply to either slow down inflation or kickstart growth. 2 different bosses, 2 totally different toolkits. Now, when a government spends more money in a year than it brings in from taxes, that's a budget deficit, and it has to borrow money to fill that gap. When you add up all of that borrowing year after year after year, you get this monster. The U.S. national debt is over $34 trillion. It's basically the country's credit card bill from decades of deficits.
Which leads to the question everybody asks. If the government goes all this money, why can't they just, print more to pay it all off? Seems like a pretty easy fix, right?
Well, there's a huge catch. Here it is. If you suddenly flood the system with more money, but the amount of goods and services stays the same, you have more money chasing the same amount of stuff. What happens? Prices have to go up. That, my friends, is inflation. And in extreme cases, like in Zimbabwe back in 2008, you get hyperinflation, where a $100 trillion bill literally couldn't buy you a loaf of bread.
All right, let's zoom out even further for Section 4. The entire world is basically one giant marketplace. But as we're going to see, globalization has its glitches.
Now, even though we know that free trade is usually a good thing, governments often try to protect their own industries. They use tools like tariffs, which are just taxes on imported goods, or quotas, which limit how much of something can come into the country. The result is almost always the same. It might help one specific company, but it just raises prices and reduces choices for the rest of us. And this global marketplace, it's surprisingly fragile. I mean, you want a perfect example? Look no further than 2021, when one single container ship got stuck in the Suez Canal. Just one boat. And it froze nearly 12% of all global trade, costing the world economy something like $10 billion a day. It's a crazy reminder of just how interconnected and vulnerable the whole system really is. Okay, for our final section, we are zooming all the way back in. Forget global supply chains for a second. Let's look inside the human brain. Because it turns out economics isn't really about charts and graphs. It's all about people. And frankly, we're all a little irrational when it comes to money.
Here's a huge one. Loss aversion. Psychologically, the pain of losing $20 is way more powerful than the joy you feel from finding $20. It just stings more. And that simple fact makes us overly cautious and terrified of taking risks, even when it would be the rational thing to do.
And come on, who hasn't done this? The sunk cost fallacy. This is when you keep pouring time or money into something that's clearly a failure, like a truly terrible movie, just because you already paid for the ticket. The smart move is to walk out, but our brains scream at us. No, we can't let that initial investment go to waste. So when you put it all together, from the basic fact of scarcity to how markets work, to how governments interfere, to our own weird brains, you realize that every economic system on Earth, whether it's capitalism, socialism, or anything in between, is just a different attempt to answer these three basic questions. What stuff should we make? How should we make it? And who gets all the stuff once it's made? And really, that's the big takeaway. Economics is this massive, ongoing, global experiment to find the best answers to those questions. And so far, nobody has nailed it perfectly. The debate over the best way to deal with scarcity, well, it continues.